Get everybody's attention, we'll call our meeting to order. Apologize for being a couple minutes late, but we did get things arranged, so. With that, we'll entertain motions for additions or deletions to the agenda. Your pleasure. Hearing none, we'll accept the agenda as presented. Next we'll move to roll call. Is taken, I presume? Yes. Okay. Then we'll move down to pledge of allegiance. If everyone will please rise and stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. Now we'll entertain a motion for the approval of the February 28, 2023 regular meeting and the February 28, 2023 closed session and the March 8, 2023 special meeting, which was a joint meeting with the county commissioners.
Move to approve.
Support.
Motion support. Any comments or questions?
Yes, I need to make a correction on the special meeting between the March 8th. Absent was Harrison and Pitts at the bottom, and on both of those, the adjournments. So we could add those.
Okay. Assume you've got that.
I can.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no. Motion is carried, and we have approved those minutes as corrected. Request for purchase. We need to consider a resolution to approve the request for purchase for 200 tons of salt, road salt it is, at $63.61 per ton for a total of $12,722 from the Detroit Salt Company. Your pleasure.
Move approval.
Support.
Motion support. Any comments or questions?
Just, this is our second purchase for the year, just to get us, in case we need it for the rest of this season. And then, obviously, the stuff we don't use stays in the shed until the next one. Cool.
Fair enough. Last chance, anybody? All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Any opposed, no. Motion is carried. Next up is to consider a resolution to approve a request for purchase from the election source for a tabulator, ballot bin, voter assist terminal and printer, a duplexing printer, and associated maintenance and licensing costs for a total of $10,320, and to also authorize the clerk to sign the related rental agreement or related agreement for maintenance and licensing fees. Your pleasure.
Move to adopt.
Support.
Okay, motion support. Anybody have comments or questions?
Just to let you know, I'll just let you know, this would be an extra tabulator for us. We currently have 3. We have no backup. Obviously, with the passage of the proposal that requires 9 extra days of in-person voting, I know the clerk's working with the county clerk to figure out the best way for our community to do that. But in the meantime, since we had the money in the budget for this year, and that I'm sure a lot of requests for new tabulators are going to start happening, we figured it's best just to go ahead and get our order in and get it done this fiscal year as opposed to next. So,
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Anybody else? Only question I have, it's the same machine that we're using for the other, basically the same as the other 3, right?
Basically the same as the other 3. The only thing that we're adding is the duplexing printer, which will be able to print an entire blank ballot off of the voter assist terminal, which we can't do now. So if we were to run out of ballots, we could print blank ballots from this printer. So that's an addition that we don't have right now, but we are going to be required to have.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for thinking ahead and being proactive on that one, so appreciate it. Anybody else? Last chance. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed would be no, and the motion is carried. Moving down to resolutions, we need to consider a performance resolution, which is required by the Michigan Department of Transportation, authorizing the annual application and permit for miscellaneous operations within the state highway right-of-way, which will include the street closures and banner placements in conjunction with the 2023 special community events, use of the state highway right-of-way. Your pleasure.
Move to adopt.
Support.
Okay, we have motion support. Anybody have comments or questions? The list is attached, as you've probably all seen. Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Moving right through here. Moving on to reports of officers, boards, and committees. Commissioners may receive the following reports by one resolution, or any commissioner may remove any of the items within the section for individual discussion and vote. With us, here for us tonight, we have an Elma Transit February 2023 report, the Elma Police Department February 2023 report, the building permits report for January and February of 2023, a finance February 2023 report, a Downtown Development Authority draft March 1st, 2023 minutes, the Airport Zoning Board of Appeals draft March 1, 2023 minutes, Planning Commission draft minutes from March 6, 2023, and the City Manager's newsletter. Your pleasure.
Move to receive 1 through 7.
Support.
Got a motion support? Anybody else? Hearing none. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no. Motion's carried. We've received 7 reports.
Move to receive number 8.
Oh, we had a motion on the second. Okay, do we have support? Support. Motion support. I presume you want Eric to
Yes.
give us the report.
Yes, I'll give you some things to discuss and get some feedback in. The lead and copper inspections, we are to the point now that we've gotten through our random selection. There's 80 residences that we haven't been able to access at this point. And we have gone door to door, knocking on doors during business hours, after business hours to try to gain access to them. One reason or another, either we've been told, sorry, you can't come in, or they just aren't answering the door or answering our communications. So after conferring with the attorney, our next step is to send a shut-off letter for the water to the owner of the property in hopes that will garner them to call us to do that. Typically, this does gain a lot of notice and gets us some responses, but there's one more step I hope we don't have to go through, but we did want to keep the commission in the loop on this. It's something that we were trying to avoid. That's why we were doing a lot of door-to-doors. They spent a lot of time on this. We are not being given any other choice from the state of Michigan, who told us that this is mandatory and we have to do those inspections. The phases that we're going through are random, so these were randomly generated. It wasn't something we just picked them. I was one of the lucky ones that was chosen out of this. I finally won something. And, so
Are you one of the ones that's fighting it too, I suppose?
No, it was actually, you know what, it was a two-minute walk into the basement, take a photo of the pipes down there,
Yeah.
and they were out. So it's really simple. And in this case, if they do, if there is something there, from the curb stop to the home, under what's being required by the state of Michigan, the city is responsible for replacing galvanized or lead. So in this case, in the past, if there's something wrong, sometimes it's on the homeowner to fix. In this case, it's going to be something that we would pick up as part of the program. So is there anything I missed on that?
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I don't think you missed anything. I think your summary was very comprehensive. I think the city staff has done a great job in terms of reaching out to these folks and trying to make contact and get compliance with the program. As Eric said, it is mandatory through the state of Michigan. And I think perhaps something to remain mindful of is that out of the 80 or so that are outstanding at this point, most of those, the far majority, are probably not intentionally not complying. It's more so of a thing where they throw it on the kitchen table and think they're going to get to it later. And so I think that a step like this will certainly garner responses from those folks. They'll probably maybe a little bit perturbed if they get a letter like this, but I think it'll spur them to call and contact the city and take care of this. I think probably, perhaps Dave, I think probably would speak better to this because he's actually had contact with some of these folks, but I think probably the number of individuals who are literally refusing to comply in that sense, they're taking an affirmative action that they will not comply. That's probably my best guess would be single digits. And that's based not only on my conversations with Dave and Eric, but also on my experience of similar programs in other communities. And that's pretty much how it goes usually. And so there are other steps after this, such as getting an administrative search warrant from the court, but it's really not, it's theoretically possible to apply for and get 80 administrative search warrants, but that's not a preferred course of action, and that would be quite unwieldy. And Especially, I think, when a lesser step could cure the problem to a large degree. And so, I guess one thing to keep in mind is that, obviously, the city is serious about it, but no one here wants to shut off anyone's water, obviously. And there'll be other checks before that occurs. And I'd be surprised if it ever occurred. But given the efforts made by the city, I do think that it's a kind of significant effort at this point is needed to jostle the folks who have not yet complied into action. So that's what I would recommend, and hopefully that winnows down the list to single digits, and then those will be our problem children, and we can take a look at that once that's completed. Thank you.
Can we continue on that, because I know I've got a couple questions. Does anybody else have questions about that particular issue before we move on to the next?
I was curious how many homes were successfully completed.
About 270.
Sense of the percentage.
And I guess anybody else before I start? One thing comes to mind is, are there any other communities that are already undergoing this step of threatening a water shut off? They were aware of?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I've not, I have a community right now that I represent in Saginaw Township. It's a little bit of a different issue. It's not actually a lead and copper review, but it's the community's upgrading their water meters to smart meters. And so that community is a township in Saginaw County, and they proceeded with this step for that issue, where they sent out shut-off notices. And it was the same deal where there was 2 or 3 folks who just adamantly refused to have the meter upgraded.
Because, I mean, all communities that supply water are required to do this same thing. I just am never anxious for us to take the lead in the state on anything like this. You know, should have come to court or whatever. I just assume everybody else get the press and set the precedent for us. So that concerns me a little bit if we are on the, the bleeding edge of this thing. That's not always the best place to be. And then, the other question, what was I thinking of? Well, I guess I kind of lost my train of thought on the second one, but there was something else. But also just want to make sure that everybody understands the state is mandating this. And the way they've mandated it, the city is paying the bill. If they find something wrong with the water pipe coming up to your house or into your house, the rest of the ratepayers of the city of Elm are going to pay for it. So that's, to me, somewhat unfair, but mandated by the state. So I know when I talk to my state representative and my state senator, I let them know that I think this is unfair, the way they've structured this law, the way I think several other things are unfair. So I would, if everybody else is speaking to their legislators and they agree with me at that line of reasoning or whatever way you feel, be sure and mention it to them. So I think, the homeowners should pay their own bill for their own repairs. It's, I get it, but it shouldn't be the general public paying the bill for private homeowners, in my opinion. So, okay, anybody else, last chance?
Well, so what is the deadline? I mean, we have a deadline that we have to have this done, right? I mean, nobody wants to be the first, but somebody has to be at some point. I'm just wondering how much time we have to.
We have to have everything submitted by what date to the state for this round of inspections?
Yes. I think the date that we're looking at is either the end of September or October 1 of this year, the end of this year. We did submit our inventory for replacement last year for the ones that were inspected, and we met our guideline for the amount that needed to be replaced. But as we've mentioned with the attorney, one of the issues that we're having is we're coming up against a timeline this fall. So what we need is to get, obviously, compliance. So these 80 that we're after, that's all we're here to do, is try to get compliance out of, to make sure that their water's safe and that we're giving out safe potable water. We can prove, and it is about proving that we don't have any lead or galvanized that was previously connected to lead. So of that, like you mentioned, we have inspected 270 residents inside, but now we're down to 80 of them, and that's to get through our first round of around 350 that we need to do annually. This is probably going to be a thing that recurs every single year, but this is the first round we're in it. These are random selections.
Do we have any information about these 80? Do we know them to be not in compliance, or we have no clue?
We have no clue. We've looked at the outside. We've done our inspection as far as outside in the right-of-way. But we've reached out, just to give you a synopsis,
We've sent 2 letters, visited all of these residents 3 times during the day. And if they're not home, if we can't make contact, we leave a flyer in our business cards. In addition, of those 80 that we didn't make contact with during the daytime, we went and visited them in the evening. So some people had a knock on the door at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and that was our staff out just trying to let them know that we needed to do an inspection, that to schedule a time, or some of them had, just like the attorney mentioned, had totally forgotten about it. And if they were so inclined, we could have done it at that point too, so.
Okay, thank you.
Good. And I just recalled what my other question was, so, I mean, ultimately, we've got to approve these things or shut the water off, right? So if we shut the water off, does that exclude it from being
No,
studied until we turn it back on?
No.
Or it doesn't relieve our obligation?
no, it doesn't. In order for it to turn on, like say if you had a residence that was vacant for a number of years, what we would do is shut them off, and before we would turn them on, we'd have to do the inventory to look at the interior of the house to make sure, to ensure that we're not selling potentially unsafe water. So if it was a vacant, like say it was an abandoned house or a house that could be demoed, qualified for demolition, those ones, if we had any of that, for instance, if we couldn't make contact with them, one of the options that the state provides is we could abandon their water service line and just totally shut it off, pull out the curb stop, and whoever buys the house or wants to have it again would have to put in a brand new service line if we couldn't get inside, so.
So that's the ultimate resolution then, is to really shut off?
Because we want to, the spirit behind the law is to ensure that we're not providing unsafe drinking water.
Okay. So do we, I mean, is that described on our website anywhere, what the ultimate solution might be to these people shut off their water? Then they're ultimately gonna have to pay for it if we do take that extreme?
From what I understand, there's nothing we can do to force them to pay for the new water service line, because the way the state mandates, and this was derived during court cases from the Flint, they interpreted the 1956 water regulation, that apparently the municipality or the provider of the water is responsible up to the house within 2 feet of the meter, whichever, it's 2 feet within the structure or of the meter, whichever comes first. So that's where we're coming from with it.
Even if the water line is considered abandoned?
If their water line is considered abandoned, what we would do, like if it's a vacant house,
Yeah.
odds are if it's on or if it's not on, we'll just shut it off. And then they'd have to put in a new service line if we had a house that was in that type of disrepair.
Well, obviously, if we shut the water off, it becomes uninhabitable by definition.
Yes,
Is that the
that's
case?
correct.
So.
No, it's put us in a really bad
Oh, yeah.
position because we're mandated to do this, or they take away our license to sell water or make water and then sell it to our customers and the city of St. Louis. But on the flip side, if we can't get in there, it puts, there is an onus on the homeowner at that time, but you have to shut someone's water off and then go to the next step of,
It's not gonna be fun.
yeah, it's not gonna be fun.
Correct. And that's kind of where we're at. If we went with the court orders, that could take several months, and that's the timeline we're already up against. So as the attorney stated, if we could cut out this 80 to single digits, life would be, everything complied, it would be nice. But if we could whittle that 80 down to less than 10, less than 5, then the court order is a different issue. So we could get in there and not have to do 80 all at once, go through the court system. But there are communities that have done this. I don't know the names of them off the top of my head. We've asked the DEQ or MDEQ, MDNR, about all this. And that is an option. They talk about tools in the bag, and these are the tools in the bag, are, shut off notices or get court ordered warrants to go inside the structure. But like Eric said, the whole system, if it's slow, it takes about 5 minutes. That's really all we're after. We just want to document what the line is coming to the house, what material it is. We take a photo of it and put it on file, and it has GPS locations so that if the state does do an audit, we can prove exactly what we saw when we saw it, and as of that date, it was compliant or not compliant.
Dave, what if everything that's in my walls is lead copper? Or
if it's galvanized or lead, according to right now, that's your problem.
okay, that's a
Ours
big
is
problem.
within 2 feet of the foundation coming into it is the city's responsibility. Or to the meter, whichever's closer.
That's a big problem. for somebody. Is
What
that
they're doing is.
is that much of a possibility? Is there much of that existing still today, or houses?
Lead? No. Interior, perhaps.
Interior.
On the exterior, we have no
Right.
lead lines that we're aware of. But what they're doing is, the way it's been explained to me a couple years ago at a conference, is they're looking at the entire length. You look at the volume of that water line and surface area of all line. So if there is any type of a lead coating on it or any lead residue, you have more of constant contact because of that surface area of the interior of the line. When you get inside your house, there's less lineal footage of pipe, less surface area. So that's why they're going after the long line from the main to the house, is because that can carry the most and prolong, it give you more in your system or your family system. And so at some point it could change, but right now it's 2 foot.
But if my kids are drinking water that my house has lead pipes in it, or galvanized pipes in it, I'm getting good water coming into the house, but what we're brushing our teeth with is still poison. And
Potentially, or doesn't reach
I think
actual
that's,
level.
I mean, from what I understand from the Flint, the reason they had such a problem was because they didn't have, they had some chemical or something
Right.
that didn't strip the coating off the inside of the
Yeah.
pipe. Like if you've ever torn apart a copper water, or a galvanized or water pipe in your house, you know, it's probably got a pinhole in it.
Yeah, right.
Those things are old. And so that protects the water from touching the surface of the pipe. So it's probably quite safe what you're drinking. In fact, we've tested for years and, you know, I believe randomly across the city for decades,
We're doing
never
good.
found any traces of lead. They've always come back zero. So if there is any, it's probably got this coating on it that is really still safe to consume, but needs to be corrected from our perspective,
Okay.
nonetheless.
Yep, it's that phosphate coating on there. If there's a disruption in the water line, it could disrupt that phosphate coating, and that's what led to Flint's issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I know, my experience, I owned several houses that had iron pipe and or galvanized pipe at one time. And once you start replacing something, you're replumbing the whole house, man, it just,
Starts falling apart.
yeah, it falls apart and you can't get water through the pinholes anymore. And
Yeah.
so I doubt there's a ton of it left in town.
It all depends on the neighborhoods and the era that they were built. The older parts of town are probably gonna be more prone. The newer parts, obviously less likely, and then when the plumbing code changed in the 70s, depending on who the plumbing inspector was, whether or not they enforced it, but the date we look at is 79 to 81. That law changed, I believe, was in 79, so that's what we're looking at for certain areas too, where you can take a reasonable guess, but the problem is, you can't guess, you have to prove beyond all reasonable doubt that it was never connected to lead. And therein lies the issue, where you're going through doing these random inspections.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, very good, Eric.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not good news.
No, but
It's just. it's
Good
a lot-
discussion.
yeah, It's a lot of work, and thanks to all the residents who have let our staff in and get that taken care of, because it's important, we're here to, like you said, it's here to do it for them. And if there is issues, there's ways to take care of it without it coming out of their pocket directly, so. Next, discussion on transit drivers. Staff has reached out and we received a nice spreadsheet from some 38 other transit agencies across the state of Michigan to compare with what our drivers compared to that. In the spreadsheet that we provided for you, we provided our scale, which is 1364 to 1775, and that's a 9-step scale. So every year, if you got a merit increase each year, it would take you 9 years if you were a brand new driver to start out, take the top out at 1775. Currently, our transit drivers, since the COVID, during the COVID, and we're still in that sort of from a financing standpoint, our drivers are receiving a $2 hazard pay per hour. So right now, they are $2 more per hour on what's being provided there in the spreadsheet, but as for comparison purposes, to let you know where we sit with our pay scale with other transit agencies across the state, we want to provide what that pay scale is. And if you take a look at that, we're currently toward the bottom of the pay scale with all those across the state. Another thing to take a look at here in the spreadsheet, the ones that are highlighted in green, Those are agencies that do pay their full-time and part-time drivers differently. The rest of them that are unhighlighted, they pay their full-time and part-time drivers the same rates. What we've talked about at the goal setting was bumping all our drivers to the grade 2, which would take us from a pay scale of 1651 to 2144. And if we take a look at that scale within across the state, that puts us more in the median of what's being done across the state of Michigan. Again, with this here, I don't know how quickly these folks move through their pay scale. This is just, a snapshot of their starting and ending and then maxing. And ours, obviously, is a 9-step pay scale from, in our case, if we went to the grade 2, it would be 1651 to the 2144. So we have evaluated how that would affect our budget, even with, we discussed moving the millage from the 0.9296 to the 0.8, which would be more, that's more than enough to cover moving our drivers to the next grade and keeping ourselves competitive with how other transit agencies are paying. We did not, this does not incorporate any school district systems. Those may pay a little bit differently, and if you're looking at things from a competition standpoint of drivers, that's something else you could look at and see how they compare, because obviously if you can make more money working for a school district, maybe you pop over there and do that. But anyway, I think that's from what we were able to garner. I mean, I appreciate the agency sharing this with us. It does make sense to look at in this next budget season to move our drivers to the grade 2.
It's interesting to me because Kent County is such a big county in there at 2087, and Benzie County is a small county in there, right there with.
Yeah, like I said, that's why there's a lot here to take a look at. So it's not everybody's the same, and their transit agency might be a little different. Like ours is a dial ride system, so that functions a little bit different than, like, say, CATA, who's on this list, who is like a bus stop, where you stay at the bus stop and you're picked up on a schedule. So
Driving substantially different vehicles
yes,
as well.
yeah, exactly. Yes.
And driving big buses.
Big buses. Yep. So anyway, I think that gives a pretty good snapshot across the state of what it looks like right now.
Okay, who has the first question on this item?
I have none.
Okay, to me, there's a lot of data here, you're absolutely right about that. I struggled to find, who's comparable to us, how we fit in this. I mean, like Michelle said, you go from Kent County to Lansing to Elma, and, there's a couple of communities I can identify, maybe the Rapids is somewhere
Well,
else. I
City
don't know.
Midland, they're 23.
Yeah, but are they comparing less than what they're doing? And I guess another concern I have is I would like to know what local schools are paying. I don't want to get in an arms race with the schools necessarily. And I would also be interested in how this compares, we're talking about changing job classifications, I think, right? Or pay ranges somehow?
This would be a pay range.
So the grades
It would be a grade. It'll go from grade 1
changed.
to grade 2. Yep.
How does it fit in with the scope of the whole group of employees we have in the city? I mean, if we're in balance now, because at one point we obviously thought this was a grade 2, right? Is that what it was?
Yeah, yeah.
So if it was a grade 2 then, and everybody else is a grade 2 we thought was equivalent, what makes this group different today than it was before? And are those other groups, do they need to be looked at too? How is all this relatively fitting together? I don't, if you do them one at a time, I'm scared that you throw the system out of whack, and before you know it, you've got all kinds of groups that are not comparative, and they're out of parity, and I'd rather do, and we talked about doing a whole study of the system of all of our employees to make sure that we're keeping everything even as possible. I mean, it's impossible to be totally 100% even probably, but to the best of our ability. I think I'd rather than one-off, take a department at a time and say, oh yeah, well, they deserve it. I'm sure everybody deserves a raise. I think they all work hard and do a good job, but when we elevate one, are we hurting another? And that's a real concern, I think, so.
Well, I might have misspoke a little bit. Currently, all our drivers are on the grade 1. So what we're recommending is moving drivers to a grade 2. Currently, the only other employees that are in grade 1 are library aides and
Part-time
finance. And part-time finance, okay, and that's it. So everybody else is on a grade 2 or more. So if I misspoke, I apologize for that. We're looking as a recommendation to move our folks on the drivers from the grade 1 to the grade 2.
Has there been a conversation about full-time versus part-time? Maybe full-time move to a grade 2 versus part-time can stay at a grade 1? Those types of conversations. I noticed there's a few of them that, like you said, that have different full-time, part-time numbers.
Anything's up in the air, as you can see through here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's every type of possibility here for the pay scale itself. I mean, the city of Marshall, they only hire full-time. I don't know how many drivers they have in that particular agency, but that probably might cost more depending on how many drivers.
The other
you
thing we
need.
don't have any information for at all is what is the total compensation package? I mean, obviously in today's day and age, you know, are you getting benefits? I mean, that can be huge. And what are those benefit packages? They can vary greatly in addition to the wages. And you know, there's a number of people that go to work every day primarily for the benefit packages because they're, you know, using probably their wage is largely going to daycare or some other thing, and you know, especially in a situation where they're in, they may be. I know when we had young children, 3 young kids, one of the wages went to daycare, and the other one, you know, she was working primarily for. If you want to look at it that way, primarily for the benefit package. So, you know, this is a start at it, but I think there's more to the picture than what we're seeing here. That's.
Okay.
And how many positions do we have that are full-time as far as drivers? Are they full-time or part-time?
There's 4 full-time drivers, or 3.
4 positions.
4. One we haven't filled because we lost them to Isabella County.
We have 4 full-time drivers typically available
Available, yeah.
positions. Yeah.
How many part-time?
We have 19 part-time.
So there's not a huge incentive for those part-time to move into a full-time role?
If I may, just come up here. Sure. You know, this is difficult for me. I've tried to elevate my folks for 3 years. And I believe David's staff started out at a grade 4. My folks have a CDL. They drive expensive equipment that we can't replace. I can't compete with the area schools. They all pay way more than what we do. So if we go backwards, I don't know how I'll run a transit. I just don't. Because September 30th, $2 an hour, it goes away.
Who pays for their CDL?
We do.
You furnish them money?
The training,
The
they pay
training.
for it, yeah.
Okay.
So if someone came in, you know, with no experience, you're starting at grade 1, which currently right now is $13.64, and to top out that $17.75, the way our scale works, it would take them 9 years to top out.
And personally, I'm not opposed to it. I just would like to understand what it's going to do, how it's going to impact the organization as a whole. You know, are we going to upset other groups if we do this for this group? You know, we've seen that before historically. If you do something just for one as a one-off without taking a look at the entire picture, then we're just going to cause a problem someplace else. And that's probably my largest fear of this. You know, maybe it's all fine and good. I don't know. But if you can bring us the data that says, okay, this is what the schools pay, this is how it fits in with the other people, and you know, I think we've got a full-time HR person at least, or per person and a half, do we?
Oh, yeah.
That data should be available
Well, that's why
through our HR department.
Sherry got all this for me, so what you're asking for beyond that, we can work on that.
But like what he's saying though, there's only a couple of areas where they're not at a higher level. So I'm not quite sure, Greg, what you're talking about. Is it, as a whole, all the areas are at a higher level, right, or grade, or
Well,
whatever you
from
call
my
it,
understanding,
and they're not.
Oh, yeah, I just wanna see the data. I mean, Greg's
Yeah.
report showing us these departments are here and where they're all located, so that we can look at it at a high level and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense.
Well, and we've had, and
I just
we've
don't
had
know. I mean-
conversations before, and I don't, correct me if I misspeak, but the $2 extra that you're saying is going away. We've had, you know, where we've hired a temporary police officer, and we've said, if this doesn't fit into the budget after so many years, and we don't have the funding for it, then it goes away, and we have done that. I mean, so I don't, and I think I wanna clarify, because I'm not sure we're all talking about the same thing. Are we talking about the differences between the various driving organizations? Because I think Greg is talking about within the city as a whole. Is that what you're referring to, Lori? Because
Yeah, I thought he was talking about maybe other departments.
departments within, because
If
that's the thing,
that's
if
the
we
case,
pick
you just
and
like go up.
choose,
Yeah.
right, so it matters, I think, within the organization as well, that if we're, I mean, yeah, I mean, you know,
I believe
certainly
my
a driver with
department
a
is the only
CDL.
department where a full-time employee
But
is
you're
at a
just-
grade 1.
Right, and you're
within
saying
the
there's
city.
only, it's a smaller number, we're not offering more than 4 full-time jobs, right?
Right.
I mean, there's only options of 4 full-time positions
Well,
available,
We've got
as drivers.
as drivers.
As drivers, because, I mean, yes, it makes, I mean, if it's just, a library aide doesn't need the same qualifications and licensing as a driver, I agree with that, but
Random
I
drug
think we
tested,
need.
I mean, it's a lot. It is. And so it's always, and it has been my feeling that my staff have been undervalued within the city comparable to other departments. And that's, I mean,
And all we're asking for is the data that shows us, okay, right now they're on parity with library aides. I mean, this is the first I heard of that. I
Right.
didn't- Before this
Me as well.
meeting, nobody brought that fact to us.
And I don't
Well,
think
we've
it's
been talking
undervalued.
about it for a couple of years.
Well, yes, we've been
But-
talking about increasing the money, but
Right.
not that that's the same wage as someone shelving books for 20 hours a week. I mean, that comparison, I've not ever heard that before, and I take some issue with the undervalue, because I don't think anyone is undervalued. It's trying to figure out from a limited pot how we disperse it between everyone. So from my personal opinion, I don't think anyone here has undervalued your drivers, but it's not a matter of just pay everybody what, you know, the highest amount we can pay. We have to figure it out, and I don't, but again, this hearing that the level 1 is the same as a library aide for a driver. But I also do think benefit packages matter. I mean, that's part of your wage if you're getting insured. But if we're only offering for full-time people that have the ability to have insurance or PTO, I mean, I guess I just don't, I mean, we talk about it, but it's in this big picture, and I don't know that, I mean, I guess this list of, I mean, they're not apples to apples, the different places. I mean, you can find as many that are paying the same or a little bit less as there are people that are paying more, but it means more comparatively within our organization, in some ways. And the school that is right here in town, and people aren't gonna necessarily move, so if we're competing with the school system, and you think that there's a vast difference from what the school system is paying and what we're
there's
paying.
only a small portion of people that are willing to drive.
Correct, and so that's the thing, no matter what we pay, there's still probably gonna only be a small portion that is able to and willing, so we can't, like Greg is saying, off balance one department, trying to lure people in for this if we're undervaluing, to use your words, other employees. I mean, there has to be a relative fairness across the board with employees based on what we're requiring. I mean, it's different if you have to have 75 degrees and licenses for something as opposed to not, and so those things matter.
Add
But that's
value,
what,
yes,
exactly.
right,
so-
and that demonstrates the need to me.
Correct.
So we just wanna see the proof of it. If I can add too, I mean, I just gave Eric a spreadsheet, that data table you gave us in the package. I converted that into Excel and we had some quick formulas on percentage increases, and there are some good things happening. I mean, clearly, I think the ridership for the number of months there was up like 50%, or averaged 40-50%, something like that. And at the same time, I think it was miles driven was up 25%, something like that. So clearly there are some efficiencies occurring there, and I'm glad to see that.
We're trying.
Yeah, and, for me on that spreadsheet, adding the percentages meant a lot. To look at the numbers, I was like, okay, these look kind of, but then when you see percentages, it becomes a lot more clear that, okay, there are some efficiencies occurring here. So that's the kind of data I like to look at when I'm evaluating stuff like this. And Eric's got the sheet, I can send you the Excel that I got, I'm sure you guys can add formulas to that. But yeah, just some simple, say, okay, these drivers are expected to do X, other people in this category or whatever categories above them are these types of qualifications. They deserve more because they've got these qualifications, they've got these needs, they've got this. Make a case. It shouldn't be that hard to put that package together, I don't think. Like I said, I'm not opposed to doing this, I just wanna,
I appreciate it.
am I gonna tick off everybody else in the city and have a revolt because we're doing something for your group that other people are clearly deserving too? I know there's other underpaid people in the city that are doing great work.
Yeah, well, and I get that, but I
I know, you're trying to
Yeah, I'm
pick
trying to take
people, and
care of
I
my
appreciate that, I
Right.
appreciate that, you for doing that.
Three
That's fine.
people in the last, we've trained 3 people in the last year, and you've got to train them, pay for the training, which takes almost 2 months, Rod, and then they leave. That's a huge cost to our department, to have that expense, and then you don't get the benefit of having that person, you're just training them for other agencies, and
And there's a danger of that in any of us.
Oh, for
because
sure.
we are a smaller agency.
I believe, I'm not sure it's totally legal, but I think I have heard of places that will have you return the cost of your CDL if you don't stay for
Certain
a
amount of
year or
time,
2
right.
years or
Right,
something.
I was just gonna ask that same
Which
question.
seems fair to me, I
They
think.
can be a
I
challenge.
think it
to
might be
enforce
fair,
those
but
things,
I don't think you can do it. Yeah.
You know, I think there are places that do that, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Dean does
Well,
or
the
not.
Navy
but-
I think what you can do is, if you loan them the money, probably, but
Yeah. that's
I'm not a
all.
lawyer and I
know,
don't know if
that's
that's
all.
really the.
If I come to you, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, if the commission would like for me to look into that and look at possibilities, I'd be happy to and report back, but.
That might be a
That's-
future
yeah,
topic.
yeah, But I think, Brett, you'll now sit down with Marilyn and Sherry, and we can go through different departments and put a report together with this
Absolutely.
stuff here, and we can start making phone calls to, area school districts and take a look at that too, so. 'Cause I know there's a difference there.
Yeah,
But I
the
was just
information I
trying to
have
provide
is a year.
the actual
2
transit
years
agencies
old.
that, are similar to us as opposed to, school districts are different.
It's hard to tell which ones on that list are similar to us.
But you get the CDL, you get the CDL from him, and then you come over to Dean for $2 an hour more, because you have the qualifications there. If I want to go to work for you and I don't have a CDL, and I'm a 22, 23-year-old person, and I want to go to work for you, and you investigate me and decide I'm okay, and I don't have a CDL, okay? So, are you hiring me right now, or are you hiring me when I get the CDL?
I'm hiring you right now.
Okay, so you're gonna start me at the lower rate, okay?
Yeah,
You're gonna pay for my CDL, okay?
yeah.
How about if the thing that kicks it to level 2 is the acquisition of a CDL?
Well, we have some folks that are currently working for us that don't have a CDL but are driving the vans that don't require
Okay.
it. So they're providing the same service, they're driving a smaller vehicle.
Right.
But they're bringing in additional skills, which, to Roger's point, I think, is they bring more value to the system,
Yeah.
because they
I
can
mean,
drive.
that could be a
Yes,
thing.
I don't know,
You start at the
I'll
first
tell you
rate
this.
until you have the proper licensure, and when you have the proper licensure, and you automatically flip to grade 2.
And then lies the problem is I only have one rod. He does all of our training, he does all of our building maintenance and our vehicle maintenance. And he does David's people, he trains their folks as well to get their CDL, so.
Is that a class B then?
Class C with
Class C.
passenger.
Yeah. It's a smaller, Class B is a
No,
full-size.
no airplanes.
Over 26,000.
I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you, Brett.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, the next one there, Chris is gonna provide a presentation on our water
sewer and solid waste rates. So you'll get the commission kind of starting to get you up to speed on where we sit with those. And then kind of along the same lines of personnel, we have two of our part-time folks. One has already said goodbye to us, and one will be saying goodbye to us here soon. And they've been big helps to our efforts here. So right now we're evaluating between assessing, finance, and code enforcement, and in some cases myself too, with some of the planning and zoning, on how to best move forward by filling those gaps there. So I just wanted to let the commission know that it's should it be 3 part-time positions, 2 part-time positions, or should we look at a full-time position that could help out with the assessing, and then code enforcement, help some paperwork possibly, or some help with finance. So we're kind of taking a look at those and see what might be best currently in the long term. So, and that's all I had for you tonight.
Okay.
That's last.
So I think we've had great success with interns and some of the part-time people. I don't know which direction you're leaning, but I know we've had some great people through here, so.
We got.
You've had some great hires, somebody has done a good job of hiring.
We've got
So,
very fortunate with a couple that are leaving us.
Yeah.
They've been very good, very good.
I
And
know
they've been
my
awesome,
years in
awesome.
business, we've had great success with some young people as well, so it's great to give them opportunities and maybe you can do both.
So we're gonna try to work that out as well, staffs and stuff. So.
Okay. Anybody else have comments or questions for the city manager's reports? Okay, hearing none, I believe we have a motion on the table, so all those in favor be yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no. Motion is carried. Thank you. Oh, I gotta get back to the agenda here. So, Eric, or Curtis, you're up next. I'm sorry, right? Oh, no, we got new business.
City funds.
That's kind of Curtis. So we need to consider a resolution ratifying the investment of the city funds, and there's a list there. It looks like, $1.5 million, about $2 million got invested for various banks and CDs and Cedar projects. So your pleasure there.
Move to approve.
Okay, is there any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Motion is carried. Now, Curtis, would you like to join us?
Thank you. So tonight's goal is basically, I'm calling it Water Bill 101. As our goal tonight is really to just take a quick run through, break down the basically what a typical user would see on their bill, and then kind of explain how those rates are flowing into our budget. So again, I'm going to say a typical because there are some exceptions. On a typical user's water bill, there are six charges. There's the water readiness to serve, the water usage, wastewater readiness to serve, wastewater usage, trash recycling, and yard waste. So the water readiness to serve. The purpose of the readiness to serve is to cover current year capital improvements, any bond payments that we have outstanding, and in a perfect world, fund depreciation. Currently, we're generating about $425,000 annually from our readiness to serve. A typical user, or anybody with 1 inch or less, is paying $11.70 a month. Our bond payment for next year is $185,000 on existing debt that we have outstanding, and that does come off the books in 2027, so we have about 4 more years on that. So until that bond comes off, we have about $240,000 available each year for capital projects, and again, to fund depreciation if we were funding depreciation. Put that kind of in perspective, over the next 5 year, the last year, the 5-year capital improvement plan that we submitted had over $5 million worth of capital projects requested that we were looking at doing. $240,000 a year, and you can probably tell that doesn't go very far when you're talking about those big of numbers on capital. And also just to put it kind of in perspective, the last street project that went out for bid, Iowa Street, the water main for that was over $400,000 alone. So we're not even covering our neighborhood street water main, let alone any other capital projects currently. The usage rate, the goal for this is to cover operations. operations include personnel, operating expenditures, our lead and copper research, and our payment to GAWA for the water. We currently are generating just shy of $1.2 million annually on the water usage side of things. Right off the top of that, about $960,000 we're projecting goes to GAWA to pay for our water. It was about $920 this year. I'm factoring in a 5% increase for next year because it's been, I don't think that's been decided yet, but consistently over the last several years, it's been at a 5% rate, so I kept it at the 5% rate. At that rate, at our current usage rate, would be go about $960,000, so that only leaves about $225,000 to cover operations for the water department. As you see at the bottom line there, after paying GAWA, we have about $750,000, which gives us about a $525,000 shortfall in operations at our current rates. On the sewer side of things, so same thing as far as readiness to serve versus the usage. Readiness to serve covers capital improvements, bond payments, and funds depreciation. Currently, we're generating $870,000 a year, roughly annually. Anybody with a 1 inch or less is paying $24.16 a month on the readiness to serve side. We have bonds outstanding next year. Our bond payment is $466,000 on existing debt. That does decrease in 2027 down to about $270 annually, and then comes off the books completely in 2034. So we've got a few years at this higher level. We'll see a reduction for a few years, but we're still about 10 years out from being debt clear on that side. Same thing, leaves about $400,000 for capital projects, so much healthier than on the water side. But again, I've been looking at our 5-year capital improvement plan, looking at about $13 million in capital projects that we were hoping to do over the next 5 years. So again, $400,000, it's a dent, but it doesn't go a long way. And just again, real quickly, some of the things that were talked about on that capital improvement plan are your neighborhood street projects, the sewer portions of that. Other sewer mains that are not part of our neighborhood street project, like Pine Avenue, north of Washington. Then there's also the lift station 16, which I know has been one of the lift stations that we've been hoping to get to as well here in the very near future. And then also about roughly $7 to $8 million worth of capital improvements at the plant itself. That plant is very dated, and we have a lot of things, and a list of things, I'm not going to go into all of it, but that are in desperate need of improvements over the next several years. Sewer usage is, again, same thing as the water, covering operations, personnel, lift station maintenance, stuff like that. Currently generates about $1.2 million annually with our current rates. Our budget, right, our proposed budget next year, as of now, it's still work in progress, but right now we're looking at about $1.2 million, which means we would have about a $40,000 cushion for operational overages that we weren't expecting. So right now, on the sewer side, we are covering our operations with our current sewer usage rate with a little bit to spare. So on that side, good, that's good news. As I think we saw GAWA and some other things, chemical bids and stuff like that, our prices are going up significantly. So while we are sitting good with this right now, that is something to still continue to monitor going forward as that cushion gets smaller and smaller each year. Trash and recycling rates, so how it was assumed to me, and maybe this isn't the perfect assumption, this is how it assumed to me, was that trash and recycling is basically a pass-through. We get charged a rate from Granger, we pass that along to the users of the services. So, and that contract that went in place last year has an annual 5% increase to it. So currently, with current rates, money brought in is covering our Granger bill at basically net zero. So assuming that we do the 5% increase, consistent with the 5% in our contract, that will be a net zero, which is essentially what the goal is on the trash and recycling side. And then the final item on here is the yard waste rates. So the yard waste covers the refuse budgets, which is yard waste, leaf collection, the compost site, and administration for the 596 program. Current rates generate approximately $335,000 annually. Preliminary budget this year is about $390,000, which means that we are short-changing ourselves about $55,000. While obviously you want to have rates that cover your costs, I think we would all agree with that. I would like to point out that the fund balance in this fund is over 125% our operational cost. So while in a perfect world, and if we were talking about other rates being being good as well. I would recommend that we have rates that are covering our operational costs each year, but in this fund, there is wiggle room to where if we did take a loss for a few years and eat into our fund balance, we would have a long way to go before we would actually get to 50% of our operational budget. I think the numbers that we projected out was we could probably go comfortably another 4 years and probably stretch it to 6 or 7 depending on if we make some cuts and really look at spending. So while we're not covering rates, this is not one of the higher alarming areas because we do have a nice cushion to fall back on. Just real quick, and I know we touched about this on at our goal setting, but how do we compare to the state and a couple of our neighboring municipalities? The average family of 4 uses about 4,500 gallons per month. Based on that, a citizen in Elma would pay about $28 for water and just under $42 for sewer. The state average, and this was as of 2021, so this is probably, I wouldn't say significantly low, but low, especially being a couple of years old, was $40 on water and $45 on sewer as the average. So we are well under on the water, fairly close on the sewer, which I think, based on the other slides, probably makes sense as far as where we're at with funding in those areas as well. I threw a couple of cities on there that are close to us. St. Louis, A, because they're close, and B, because we get the water from the exact same place, so they're paying the same amount to Galwa that we are as far as rate per gallon. Their average citizen would pay for the same usage about just under $48 for water and just under $60 for sewer, compared to our 28 and 41. Mount Pleasant is closer to comparable. Still, we are lower on the water side, but we would be higher on the sewer side. And then City of St. John's, same thing with St. Louis, not quite as extreme, but we are definitely lower than them on both the water and the sewer side. So just to kind of show where we are comparing with some of our neighboring municipalities from that standpoint. So again, tonight was really not supposed to be too in-depth with the numbers, more just a general overview to explain where we are at, what our current rates are really providing us, what we want to do moving forward. I had the note on there that we are not currently sustaining costs in water distribution operations for capital or for wastewater capital based on our current plan. There are options out there that we are exploring, several of them. We have applied for an SRF loan for the water side. We are in the process of working on a USDA loan on both the water and the sewer side. We have discussed some, it says private loans. There's a company that had approached us with a funding model that they discussed that they could work with us on, and we've talked with them on the wastewater plant improvement side on that, is seeing what those options are. Traditional bonding, as far as what we've done in the past with going out and getting a bond to try to cover some of these costs over a longer period of time. Those have pros and cons. Obviously, if we're spreading it over a longer period of time, it's less impact now, but you're paying for it longer and you are paying more long term. But as far as being able to get to some of these capital projects will not be, realistically, we cannot just rate increase our way in the short term to be able to cover these capital projects. We would need to go get a loan or a bond in order to cover if we're going to do all the capital projects that we want to do. The other thing is depending on what kind of loan it is, they would come in and automatically do a rate analysis, and they would basically tell us the minimum amount we would have to charge in order for them to let us qualify for a loan. So again, positive pro or con of that is it kind of takes the decisions out of our hands a little bit, where if we want to qualify for it, we have no choice but to raise the rates to at least the minimum amount that they would require. And at least on the water side, probably on both sides, but at least on the water side, we would be looking at a rather sizable increase in order to be able to even qualify for some of these. So again, not necessarily tonight. Tonight was really supposed to be more introductory to kind of explain things for the newer commissioners and just a review for the commissioners who've been here before of how these rates work and kind of where we're sitting with current rates. But as we go forward, we are going to have some serious discussions over whether we can sustain our operational and our capital wish list with our current rates, and kind of that balancing act of how much are we willing to increase, and then whether we want to do it all at once, whether we want to spread it over 2, 3, 4 year, what our plan is, or if there's things that we want to cut out of the things that have been on the wish list because we don't want to, or just can't, or however, raise rates. Those are the kind of conversations that we're having preliminary right now in our budgets. So just kind of hoping over the next few weeks as we're preparing our budgets and having these conversations to get some direction of where the commission's thinking as far as rates and as far as some of those capital needs. We will be bringing a capital, or basically an updated capital improvement plan to you probably at the next commission meeting. And we can kind of, there's items on there that, we've had on there is thinking that they are high priority or high wish list items, but if there's things that can be kicked out a few extra years until we get things on track, or if there are things that the commission decides they don't want to do entirely right now in the order of saving costs, we can definitely discuss that, but we're kind of right now operating based on the wish lists of the past few years. So that's, like I said, really what I wanted to do tonight. I wasn't looking for too deep in the weeds with the numbers. It's supposed to be more high level, kind of a quick synopsis to just explain where we're at and start getting the thoughts in the head as we go through the next couple months of where we're going to end up with rates. So I'm happy to answer any questions now, or if anybody has any.
Question?
Another question, I'd just like to, if we are applying for loans and they have recommendations, I would think that we would want to try to do that so that we would be able to get loans to fix that stuff.
Well, excuse me, Michelle, some of those things that when Curtis says wish list, they're kind of needs.
Right.
These are,
Yeah.
some of them we've been, like Lift Station 16, we've been talking about, Roger brings it up, all the Greg brings it up. That's that big sewer line that runs
Yeah.
behind the nuns and that area to fix that. That's a $1.6 million project.
And that's to get us to Pine Street.
Yeah, yep. So a lot of these things are just, we're gonna be coming to you with some different options and then incorporating these possibilities of loans in with them. We're gonna have to raise rates. We haven't done anything with water rates on the ready to serve side. That's why it's $11 and something. I think since 2010 or 12, somewhere in there was the last time. The wastewater, that one's in better shape because on 16 we had some bonds, and what Curtis said there, that the bonding agency came and said you have to charge at least this. So that's why that one came in, and that's why we're in better shape on that side than we are in the water. But yeah, painting the water tank, that's a requirement by Eagle, so that has to be done in the next couple of years. So there's some things that, yeah, they wish they were wishes. Because like our neighborhood street project, we just got all that, approved and things, and obviously we have to replace those underneath there, because it doesn't make sense for us to put a brand new street on something that's 75 years old, and then 2 years later we're having water coming up through it. So just wanted to let you know kind of where we stand, and like Curtis says, just where we are with our direct neighbors on costs, for rates. And we can take a look at some, scaling it out, and then once we get some stuff back from USDA and SWIFT funding and that sort of thing, we'll have a better idea of what they would be looking for too and what we should be doing, but we'll come to you with some options for you to consider.
How long has it been since we have been in balance with water?
I can't answer that directly, but as far back as I went back to look, we haven't been, so. Yeah.
I guess maybe questions. One thing comes to mind, and I'm not surprised at this, we've always been told, or I've been told a number of times over the years, that we were never eligible for grants. Other communities around us have had our RDA grants or whatever, and we've never been eligible, I'm told, because our rates are too low. So we've been, we were told we're too efficient, we can't get a grant because our rates aren't high enough. Is there any possibility if we raise rates that we can get some grants? Have we looked at that at all? And I don't expect an answer right now, but just, keep that in mind.
I'm not aware of, I guess, and again, I'm just not aware of anything where we didn't qualify specifically because our rates were low at the time. There are many that in order to qualify, they would force us to do a rate analysis study, and they would give us a minimum in order to qualify.
And I get that, especially for the bonding, but for grants or anything else,
Yeah.
but just want to make sure we're aware of that and we're looking for grants if there's anything out there. Don't know if there's or not. And what's the other thing? Can't hold two thoughts at the same time.
Well, from the, what you just mentioned about the rates going up for granting opportunities, last year when we raised the water rate at 20%, that did help us get into that USDA consideration on the loan side of things. So we're going to have to look at increasing that again anyway, but we haven't run across any like full-blown grants at this point, because if that would help my discussions with you, if I had a grant that said, hey, if you had your rates here, then you can be at least eligible to apply, that would make this conversation a little easier to with you, but I'm not aware of anything at this point with that.
So it's always been looking on, I'm sure.
Yes.
I know, I think Breckenridge is one that just basically replumbed the city. They got grants for the whole thing for somehow, I don't know how they did it. In any event, the other thing did come to mind, I forgot to remember the second point, the bond, especially the long term, and probably that shorter bond that we've got, we'll have paid off in 3 or 4 years, probably isn't factoring out, is, I guess I'm not sure the rates we're paying on that, are we able to prepay it and get a lower rate? Or
We are
anything,
not
or is
able,
that-
they are not eligible for prepayment, but our rates are fairly, I mean, I think
They're still good.
all but one of them, I think, is at like 2.8% or
So
less. I
pretty-
mean, they're competitive
pretty good
rates,
rates.
it's not, we're not paying high.
No opportunity there then,
Not really, I mean, there might be not worth the,
the cost of going through the process.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that was the second thing, so.
So I know we've discussed different things at Water Authority about the rates, and there's, I mean, we don't, obviously we need to increase our rates, but do we have a plan where it's a percentage every year for, I mean, a certain, because I feel like comparatively, if we double it next year, I mean, that's gonna be really hard for people to swallow. But if we have some kind of plan where we're incrementally more in a more manageable
there are,
amount.
the only thing I would say about, yes, that is absolutely an option, the only thing I would say about that is we've been operating out of our fund balance for the last few years for our capital. We are getting dangerously close to being too low to be able to do that, so while we could absolutely do a more gradual increase, in fact, I would probably recommend at some level doing that, we may have to consider some of the capital projects that, like I said, maybe we were open for 2024 or 2025, we might have to keep off a couple years if we don't fund it right up front, because it's gonna take us a while to build that back up, so absolutely
So,
we can,
so
but
when
we
you
might
bring
have
this
to.
information, it'll be
Yeah.
like an either or, like either we do, we've got things that maybe you termed kindly as a wish list, but are necessary.
Yeah.
And that means that we increase rates 50% this year and then, 50% next year, or.
Yeah,
I
we
don't- yeah, I-
plan on bringing multiple different scenarios,
Okay.
saying that, if we did this, we could do this.
Okay.
If we only did this much, we could afford, 4 out of these 6 projects, and we'd have to choose our favorite child kind of thing. and-
Okay, I appreciate that,
Yeah,
because
so yes,
I get
that is-
overwhelmed and I
oh.
need a couple of 2, 3 max
Yep.
choices to choose from.
Yeah,
and-
that is the plan that we would like to do.
And if we could also see, I know we've kind of gotten a habit of just pushing depreciation aside, right? Because we're trying to, obviously you have to pay the bills first and then depreciation. I would like to see what are our ideal depreciation numbers. Because I think long-term you have to.
Have been doing that for water plant or no?
Gawa.
Gawa,
is-
That's where I get confused, because I think Gawa is
Yeah.
us.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
No,
and
Gawa-
we're not.
Gawa
So
is
Gawa's
looking their
good, but we're
depreciation
not.
operating,
Okay.
yeah, water
Great.
distribution is not.
Right.
All right, thank you.
I think with everything, we need to know what those numbers
Yes.
are, and
Absolutely.
it needs to be included in that as well.
Absolutely.
So, another thing, Curtis, in those rather substantial capital items, or that capital numbers that you threw out there, is that provision included for all these water lines that need to be inspected, all the cost of digging those things up, I mean, doing all these inspections that are required, those things are all in this plan? That you called a wish list, but they're being mandated,
No.
right? I mean,
The inspections themselves are part of operations. The replacement is part of the capital.
so somewhere it's buried in the operations and capital, I mean,
Yes,
the
yeah.
components.
Yes,
That's not outside of this, it's gonna be a separate conversation then.
Well, it's built into that, it's built
Okay.
into the both the operation and the capital numbers that were presented.
That's good news.
Yeah.
That it's not gonna be a separate.
And truthfully, the lead and copper really has played a big role in
Yeah.
expediting the fund balance going down, because that is something that I don't think many municipalities were prepared for that sizable of an expenditure being required of us without any additional funding to help with it. So that really, while there are other factors too, that really was the thing that really brought this delay as quickly as it did, because that really did expedite a slow bleed into a very noticeable one.
And it might be good to help the public understand what's going on here and what we're facing. If you could give a high level, again, not tonight, but if you could come back and say, okay, we're, you know, for the next 5 years, we expect this mandate from the state is gonna cost water users, you know, whether it's 1.2 million or if it's $50 or whatever that number is. And again, nobody's gonna hold you to it, but just a real high level number that this is a big factor.
Yeah.
I believe it's going to be.
It is a very large factor.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, did you have anything else? Or that's it, okay. Next up, we need to consider a request from the city manager to conduct a closed session, which is permitted under section 8D of the Open Meetings Act of MCL 15.268 regarding the purchase or lease of real estate property, real property. We need a roll call for that.
You want to see if there's anybody, invitation to the public before that?
Oh, we can do that ahead of time if you'd like.
If there's anybody who wanted to address the commission.
Okay. Because I would anticipate that when we come out of closed session, well, other than appropriations, we probably
Yeah.
will not take any action, so that nobody has to stick around if they don't want to, but are there any members of the public that would like to, or I guess maybe we should start with the commissioner, right? Commissioner comments, if we'd like to, Roxanne, you want to start us off? We can go there first, and then we'll have to invite the public. So, Danny?
Thank you, Curtis, for the overview. Appreciate it.
Roger?
Agreed, thanks, Curtis, that's good information, it's scary stuff, that's why we get the big bucks. Spring break, coming in 2 weeks, kiddies, please. Thank you.
Spring or break? Which
Spring.
Take it back.
Both, actually, both.
Lori?
Thank you, Curtis.
Michelle?
Yeah, thank you, Curtis, and also thank you for all the information on the transit issue. I want to make sure we do right there.
Sarah?
Oh, no.
Nothing from me, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Nothing for me, again, I appreciate the information and tough discussions, but good that we're having them, I guess. So with that, we'll invite the members of the public. If there's any members of the public who would like to address the commission, please go to the podium, state your name and address, and I believe we allow up to 5 minutes per individual to share their thoughts with the commission. Anybody like to talk? I don't hear many. I'm not seeing anybody make that move, so we'll assume that they're not going to. With that, we'll move to the city manager's request to conduct a closed session, which is permitted under 8D of the Open Meetings Act. And again, it's regarding the purchase or lease of real property. And your pleasure for going into that closed session.
So moved.
Support.
The motion support. Need a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Allman?
Yes.
Commissioner Bear? Vice Mayor Harrington?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrison?
Yes.
Commissioner Fitz?
Yes.
Commissioner Warnick?
Yes.
And Mayor Mapes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Okay, so we're back in session. We'll entertain a motion to pay the appropriations.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion support. Did you get that?
I did not.
Pick a name. I think it was Roger or Dan?
Dan, sure.
No, you're just passing it back.
Okay. Any questions on appropriations? Last chance. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no. Motion's carried. Last chance for comments. Hearing none. Anybody from public? Still don't hear anybody. We'll entertain the motion to adjourn.
Smart.
Got a motion support. All those in favor, please yes, say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no. Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, everyone.
Have a good night, guys.